Welcome to Panther and Cage.
On the issue of critical race theory, et cetera, I'll obviously have to get much smarter on whatever the theory is. But I do think it's important, actually, for those of us in uniform to be open-minded and be widely read. It is important that we train and we understand, and I want to understand white rage, and I'm white, and I want to understand it. So what is it that caused thousands of people to assault this building and try to overturn the Constitution of the United States of America? What caused that? I want to find that out. I want to maintain an open mind here, and I do want to analyze it. It's important that we understand that because our soldiers, sailors, airmen, Marines, and Guardians, they come from the American people. So it is important that the leaders, now and in the future, do understand it. I've read Mao Zedong. I've read Karl Marx. I've read Lenin. That doesn't make me a communist. So what is wrong with understanding, having some situational understanding about the country for which we are here to defend? And I personally find it offensive that we are accusing the United States military, our general officers, our commissioned, non-commissioned officers, of being, quote, woke or something else because we're studying some theories that are out there. That was started at Harvard Law School years ago, and it proposed that there were laws in the United States, antebellum laws prior to the Civil War, that led to a power differential with African Americans that were 3/4 of a human being when this country was formed. And then we had a Civil War and Emancipation Proclamation to change it. And we brought it up to the Civil Rights Act in 1964. It took another 100 years to change that. So look it, I do want to know. And I respect your service, and you and I are both Green Berets, but I want to know. And it matters to our military and the discipline and cohesion of this military.
What is wrong with understanding? That was a very interesting question posed by General Mark Milley. That happened, I do believe that was July 21st. I do believe that may have been the 16th. Let me get myself together. Welcome to Panther and Cage. All right. Just making sure everything's set up. Welcome to Panther and Cage, blogcast where we believe there's no such thing as a dumb question. I'm your host, Panther. Panther and Cage is a place where we are taking advantage of the opportunities to speak on a variety of topics from a unique Afrocentric perspective or perspectives. The goal is to responsibly engage in progressive and relevant discussions that expose the negative narratives that have been used to historically perpetuate social and cultural bigotry. It is to include the audience and their contributions to the conversation in order to push the national conversation forward. And for that particular reason, you are encouraged to comment and to like or share any of the content presented on the Panther and Cage Facebook page or any of these live streams that we stream on a weekly basis. If this is your first time joining us, I would like to welcome you all, and I hope that you enjoy. Now, there's been a lot of things that have been going on that we haven't covered yet, like the national spike in gun violence, voter suppression, COVID-19 Delta variant, TikTok employing an algorithm which suppresses the accounts of people of color, and then Native American injustices such as them getting arrested on their own reservation. And then we also have Jennifer Lopez is back with Ben Affleck. I'm just kidding. I'm just playing around. We wouldn't dare talk about that. There'll be none of that gossip stuff on this cast. But if you follow Panther and Cage, you follow the broadcast on a weekly basis, you'll notice that tonight's stream is it may not completely adhere to the concept of continuity. The following presentation that I'm going to provide will be somewhat unpretentious, but it's going to be a part of the content that we fully intended to cover months ago. And I do believe we were disconnected and we just move forward and hope that we would get a chance to come back and revisit this conversation. So this this presentation will be, it's a part of exploring the narrative that was shouted out in response to the Black Lives Matter movement's momentum, as many had questioned the Black Lives Matter Global Network Foundation's intentions at that time and the reasoning for their political shift that was occurring in society. It was it was prior to the January 6th insurrection, and it was at a time when my co-host had warned that there were factions like the Boogaloo movement. Let me get this image up on the screen for you. I don't like to just talk. I want to get you guys to be able to see what's actually going on. Give me a second and maybe some feedback. And if there's any echoes or anything, go ahead and let me know in the comment section. Sometimes we used to encounter this echo issue, but I don't believe that we've taken care of it completely yet. So I want to check the Facebook and make sure that it is streaming correctly. While I wait on that, all right, here we go. All right, so as I was stating, it was a time before the January 6th insurrection, and my co-host Cage went out and went out of his way and actually did a lot of research into a lot of these groups, these far-right extremist groups. And one of the groups or the factions that he felt was consistent with something that was going to be significant, coming down the pipe. Not that he predicted January 6th insurrection, but that he knew that something may be coming from these particular groups. And the first group that he brought up to show during that Freestyle One discussion was the Boogaloo movement. And as you can see here from the information, I won't be going over it in detail, but just know that this was actually something that Cage went into quite some time to explain exactly who these individuals were, and that we'd be trying to see if we could keep an eye on the individuals that would be involved with this far-right extremism. And this is one of the groups. Another group was called the First Amendment Praetorians, and we'll talk a little more about that later, about them later. And then I do remember we went in depth more about the Proud Boys because they seem to be the most active. And I do believe right around that time is when the President Trump actually told them to stand by and stand back and stand by, as if he had them under orders. And so we felt that that was significant. So that was one of the reasons why we actually went into this group and did it more than once. I think we caught up with them, and they were going through a name change and then some kind of what it appeared to be some kind of power struggle. Although I thought that that was just some stuff, stunts for the media. So I do know that last we checked, there was, I believe there was an indictment coming down for Enrique Tarrio, and he did admit to being on the site of the January 6th insurrection days prior, and I do believe he was detained because they felt that he was a threat. At least that was what I was getting from the reporting that I looked at that time. Now, beyond that, there was a later information that came out that stated that that this individual, Enrique Tarrio, and the Proud Boys were being financed by someone who was affiliated with the Chinese nation, I believe. But there's a lot more to that story. I didn't want to go into in depth into that because a lot of that stuff is truly speculative, And for all we know, that these are all cover and front groups. So until we get into more information, I will not be really covering them in depth. Uh, we believe that right now they're irrelevant. The First Amendment Praetorians, we believe, are the next group to actually to to be activated, if that's such a concept. But anyway, uh, getting on to that, um, we talked about these groups, and we introduced them to what we felt was like this threat window at that time. And it was at that time of concern, as the reflections had began to reveal that something historical was truly about to break. And there was a great denial of existence of this sort of white apathy, and how it was impacting the current social political atmosphere. So that was one of the reasons why, like I said, we're going to get away from this particular group, but we are going to talk about it in a very generalized way for the rest of the night. Now, it occurred around the time that we were covering racial epithets that were commonly being used to socially perpetuate bigotry. And there was just huge background of white noise, no pun intended there, that seemed to drown out the voices that were exploring the concept of white privilege at that time. Um, there also was a very heated discussions at that time occurring in every corner of social media, uh, TikTok, Twitter, of course, Facebook, you name it. I do believe the George Floyd uh, death had just occurred that May, and around late June, it just we were still reeling from the Ahmaud Arbery, the loss of Ahmaud Arbery, and I do believe there was a lot of discussions that were coming out. I know that at some point I started to hear the protests were occurring, and I started to hear the All Lives Splatter. That's what I was just thinking of the past minute. Um, the All Lives Splatter uh, response seemed to be gaining some traction to the point that someone even expressed it to me on my social media, my personal social media account. So at that time, like I said, you can see where it says Freestyle 3.0 there on the image. We did cover these organizations, cover these groups, and I do believe that was right after we did the second part of the series of racial epithets. So at that time, I know that white privilege and white fragility was the major topic, the major national conversation. But anyway, me and my co-host, we attempted to sift through all of that white noise and to create this platform that you see here right now. And that platform is for the Brevard County citizens who wanted to actively engage in a way that would allow them to express their feelings and the reasoning for their feelings. And then also we want to add to or give them information as to what they may be missing when they engage in these heated discussions. And in layman's terms, we were trying to give them information so that when they would come out and say something or express themselves, that they wouldn't do so in the most ignorant way possible. And so we attempted to try to kind of help the individuals in the community, because we saw that some of the responses were just downright ugly. To call a black man or a black father, or to say a black man is afraid of being a father, is a very negative racist trope, one that is used by racists. And to call them animals or monkeys is to the ear of a white supremacist. Now there is a difference, but we're not going to go into the difference of that right now. If you want to know, get into the comment section and make a comment. I'll try to see if we can get to that in the time being. But this is hopefully this isn't long. I do have a couple of videos, a lot of videos to show you. But this is just to make the point and finish this far right extremism subject over to the left, so that we can pick it up later and we can just pick up and run with it, instead of having to define and understand uh, all of the nuances that go into what is a far right extremist. Now, this at the particular time that we discussed this, the potential for the infiltration of white supremacists in lower levels of government was there, and how they may use that position, infiltration, or the infiltrated position of power, or to further threaten communities of color. We discussed that. We discussed what would be the potential solutions to help resolve that issue, and the details that are surrounding the reactions of Black African Americans and people of color to narratives like All Lives Matter, Back the Blue, and the endless excuses that were used to justify police brutality. Now, that may have gone over your head, but if you actually think about what I just said, the endless excuses that were used to justify police brutality, not to justify good police work, but police brutality. And that's something. 'Cause the only police brutality you'll probably ever see me agree with was, I think, was in a movie, and it was Bad Boys, maybe Bad Boys 3, I believe. But either way, that's the only time you'll probably see me, not say anything about it. But police brutality is something that we do not support here, and in no way, shape, or form, and no excuse. You are an officer of the law, and you have sworn to protect, to uphold the Constitution and to protect the citizens of that state if you're a state police officer, and of that city if you are, uh, a police officer, and even the sheriff's department. So that I just want to get that, make sure we understand that. Okay. Now, this conversation also was relevant to the most recent Freestyle 9 live stream that we did recently, and that was by way of the racial epithet monkey and monkey N-words. Now, we had long exposed the results of the similar behavior and the origins when we completed a presentation back in October of last year. And those were very hard live streams to conduct because the audience at that time we were communicating to, they had not specifically referred to Black men as monkeys, but they did have a direct reference to the idea that Black men were animals. And not only were those disturbing, but they challenged us to do the best we could to actually accurately measure where the audience's mental acuity actually was. This was a very huge task, and we didn't want to insult anybody, but we decided to start at a certain area or a certain point of the conversation, and that's how we began this podcast. So in the last live stream, I presented videos of a Mount Laurel man by the name of Edward Cagney Matthews. Okay, and I don't know if anyone is familiar with that, but he is the man who called his neighbors monkey N-words. Said it several times, and then he invited everybody to come to his house, and he said literally the words, "Come see me." Gave out his address, and I think not even a day or two later, over 300 protesters showed up at his doorstep, and they were demanding that he came outside. Police ended up telling him, "Don't come outside," and then they ended up arresting him later once they got the videotape, or actually once the video went viral. There were some things, some areas in that presentation where there's a larger discussion, but we didn't go into it yet. We can, like I said, we can pick it up and resume at any time. So this was one of the issues that we just wanted to address and talk about, and show that that even though this would seem to be an individual show of racism, that there was a potential of some systemic racism or institutionalized racism, as the police officers had not done anything to this individual and he had terrorized his neighbors for quite some time. But he felt freely enough to continue calling Black people monkeys in front of the law enforcement. He even knew law enforcement by first name. I think he called him by his last name, but he was that familiar with them. If you look at the other videotape. But if you just want to know any more details about, Edward Cagney Matthews, then you can go over to the last Panther Cage live stream, which is going to be Freestyle 9, and take a look at that one. It's a very tough episode. The N-word is shouted many times. It's kind of sickening when I hear it myself, especially in that format. So be advised that it is a tough watch, but one that was necessary so that we could pick this conversation up and move forward when we have our Black on Black violence in the Black community discussion. Now, in the last, like I said, in the last live stream, we talked about Edward Matthews, and he took his time to express his white supremacist, racist tropes and his beliefs, that he believed that black people were monkeys. And he used that several times in a very casual manner. And he was quite offensive to his neighbors, uh, and even to the officer responding, Officer White, that was responding. And then he challenged anyone who opposed his viewpoint to come to his home. He gave out his address, and on July 4th, holiday weekend, the protesters showed up. Now he was arrested, and now we have this incident here, and hopefully you've been taking a look at the image to my left, where a woman by a 46-year-old Mount Laurel, same area, Mount Laurel woman by the name of Elizabetta. I cannot pronounce her last name, but you see it there. Go ahead and Google that. I'm going to put a link in the comment section to try to give you guys a chance to know. Actually, I've already placed a link in the last Panther and Cage Freestyle 9. So if you want to take a look at that story yourself, it's already there. So go back to that page or go back to that stream and look in the comment section. You'll be able to get the information you need for that there. Now, this individual verbally berated the Super 8 hotel front desk clerk. And she called him the N-word and then started throwing things at him. I think she threw a bottle of sanitizer at him. And she's now facing charges of bias, intimidation, harassment, and assault after her tirade of racial slurs was caught on video. Now, like I said, I placed the links for that story in the last stream's Facebook comment section. So I'm going to go ahead and take a look and see if I have any comments. I do believe I do have a comment. I saw a red light. That's what's going on. What's going on, Elgin? Thank you. I appreciate it. Guys, go ahead and this has also been streamed to YouTube also. So go ahead and like, comment, share. Tell me what you think. Tell me what you want to hear about. We do have a direction that we're heading, but we would mind hearing where you want the conversation to go, so that we know that we're addressing what you are interested in, so that you can also join these conversations. We want this to be extremely interactive. If you want a link and you want to get on, I can actually put you on. I'll send you the link. You get in here, we can have a discussion live. It shouldn't be too difficult. This is the same kind of water cooler discussions that you're going to have. Just know that when we have discussions, I like to provide receipts because I don't like the back and forth. A lot of the times I like to state a point and let's get around that point of reasoning and explore the reasoning why that exists. I don't like to just go tit for tat. You say the book is blue and I say it's red. And then you say, no, you were taught that it was blue. And I tell you, well, I was taught that it was red. And then we're still wasting time. So I want relevant and progressive discussions. And progressive means that it's moving forward. So if you do want to participate, just let me know. Get you in, and we will try to take care of what we can take care of. Let me go ahead and make this screen bigger for you so you can go ahead and see this. Get all the information before I end up moving forward. Okay. So now she's facing charges of bias, intimidation, and harassment, and assault. Like I said, I placed the link in the last Facebook stream's comment section, and that was one of the things I wanted to bring up that was associated to last week. Now, let's get this off. Now, we also talked about Juneteenth. Last week, we talked about Juneteenth. We talked about what it was. We talked about its origins. And I believe it was like the third time we talked about it, but it just kept coming back up. And I got questions in my DMs, so I decided to go and just try to put as much information out. But we did the whole thing, and there shouldn't be any more questions regarding Juneteenth at this point. So we talked about the origins, like I said, and what it means to Black America, and the reactions by the conservatives who were taking their time to step out and communicate contradicting messages about Juneteenth becoming a national holiday. Just before we concluded that live stream with that, we talked about a very prominent YouTuber by the name of Charlie Kirk. And we reviewed a live stream that he conducted, where he took his unique look into the 1921 Tulsa Race Massacre, and he attempted to downplay the severity of the 300 plus Black lives that were unaccounted for. His perspective focused more on 10 white participators in that massacre that were killed during this 2-day massacre. And not only did he downplay the importance of the 3 missing Tulsa residents, but he characterized the 1921 Tulsa race massacre as a race riot. And this is something that I've seen done many times over. There's nothing like misinformation that just makes my skin crawl. I found it to be funny about his reference, though. What I found to be funny about his reference, which was often like I said, has been used to miseducate conservative audiences. It lacked the depth to bring forward the accountability regarding the entire event. So as I stated, he straight up lied. I stated that in the last live stream, that he just straight up lied, and he never gave any receipts. And again, like I said, that to me is another example of an invasion of accountability. Now, Mr. Kirk decided to provide the reasonings for this event, and get this: the reasoning for the reasoning for the event was a negative narrative, and that narrative was that black people have an inability to control their emotions. Yes, that is a negative narrative that he chose to use. And you can go watch that video, because I did show his video at the same time while streaming that Freestyle 9. So go back and take a look at that. I really don't want to spend too much time talking about him, but I just want to show that negative narrative, and we will continue to cover information that will eventually eradicate this negative narrative also, if you do have a belief in the validity of this negative narrative. But this was just a case where black people, he said this was a case where black people hit white men and women in North Tulsa, and the South Tulsa natives hit back harder. He went on to conclude that the 1921 Tulsa race massacre was not racially motivated. So I'm going to leave that there. We all know that Mr. Kirk has something so far up his derriere. He can't see or smell, I assume. But our Panther and Cage audience, I'm sure you guys understand, and much more than Mr. Kirk regarding the 1921 Tulsa race massacre. I'm sure you understand that this kind of misinformation or this miseducation and political rhetoric is seated at the base of the belief system of white supremacists. But when we discuss this, this exposure that has recently taken the attention of Americans who did not believe in its existence, we took a very long and a very deep dive into how it came to be at the center of the conversations at that current time. That is where we came with the racial epithets. We even talked about, it even pushed as far as deep as slave patrols and the creation of the police in America. So yes, we did do a deep dive. But here tonight, we're going to use a series of videos to discuss further the far-right extremism in America. This is a subject we're going to discuss tonight, and why it is on the rise. Now, I'm going to play a video, but the first video that we saw earlier, it played within that introduction, it played General Mark Milley, and he was speaking on having a greater situational awareness to the ideologies that are influencing the American nation. Right now, the look of disgust that you saw on the Florida Representative Matt Gaetz' face communicated so much when you consider what is currently on the table today. Now, Gaetz had a grimace on his of disbelief on his face, and it was just because Milley said that he wanted to keep an open mind about understanding critical race theory and other theories, so that those who are in uniform are trained, and that those leaders that then now and in the future understand it. He directly asked, what is wrong with understanding and having a situational awareness about the country which those soldiers are there to defend? And before we take a deeper look into General Milley's the details of his reactions, we need to take a look at what is defined as white rage or the far right extremism. And so I'm gonna stream a couple of videos, and I want you guys to pay attention so we can get through this. And there's a lot of information that we're going to talk about. And if you have a question or a comment, go ahead and put it into the comment section. I'll be looking forward, and I'll try to see if I can separate a moment so we can get to discuss exactly what this far right extremism or this white rage actually is. Now, you'll probably recognize, if you've been following Panther and Cage for quite a while, you'll probably recognize his first video. Like I said, we were going to show this and finish this out at another time, but we're going to finish it up tonight.
We're not letting them in, but they're trying to flood our country.
The nation faces a major threat, but it's not the one President Donald Trump is talking about.
What is the biggest threat to the United States right now? Well, I think on the terrorism front, it's white supremacists. More people have been killed by white supremacists since 9/11 than by people who, believe these kind of extremist, twisted forms of Islam.
In 2006, there were 6 incidents of terror-related violence on U.S. soil. In 2017, that number was 65. That's a nearly 1,000% increase in a decade, and most of those are the result of far-right violence. The last few years alone have given us several high-profile examples, like the Pittsburgh synagogue attack, the Unite the Right rally in Charlottesville that saw a woman killed, and the Charleston Church massacre.
That's our major goal, is we want an all-white nation. We want, because we believe we're the superior race. We believe that we were here first.
This display of violence has been decades in the making. And for years, some have been trying to warn us about this very moment. Hey fam, I'm Imayan. In part 1 of our 3-part series, we're taking a look at the explosion of far-right extremism and looking at what, if anything, the government has done to combat it.
You will not replace us. You will not replace us.
This is America. Scenes like this have become more commonplace because groups like these are more prevalent. The United States is in the middle of a surge of far-right violence. 2/3 of politically motivated violent attacks in 2017 were tied to far right-wing ideologies. It's the increase in these types of attacks that interests Heidi Beirich. She's an expert on extremism and for years has been studying the growth of right-wing violence in the US. And we've agreed not to disclose her location for safety.
Usually far-right extremism is exemplified by 2 things. Either extreme anti-government positions, and by that I don't mean like low taxes, I mean literally opposed to sort of the federal government and the idea that it exists. And then as you get more radical on the far right, you start notions of white supremacy and racism become part of the thinking.
Now, you saw some images there. We'll get to them in a moment, but I want to immediately start right where we left off. So according to Heidi Beirich of the Southern Poverty Law Center, far-right extremism has become a part of the thinking in America. And the nation's biggest threat is white supremacists. This is according to Heidi Beirich, right? Now, I don't believe that our statistics will actually tell us the precise reasoning for the problem. Anyone who follows us knows that I hate statistics because of a number of reasons. But I just can't focus on the statistical result and say that it actually qualifies what has been counted. What's been counted is only what's been counted. There's we have to look at the counters and where they're counting, and then the other conditions that when we're talking about statistics, how this data is recorded. But anyway, that's a dive into critical thinking, and it's a deep slope I'm not going to go through tonight. But a lot of detractors and critics of this vlogcast also use statistics to give themselves a better picture of the problem set. So the statistics used by the producers of the previous video claim that there was a 1,000% increase in the decade starting from 2007. Now, 2007 is a very significant year because especially for Brevard County residents, because that the reasoning behind that is because that is the year that crime began to rise. Now, this national rise in crime currently we're facing today revealed that, you know, the elevated statistics were not exclusive to Brevard County. So those specific points are what made up for a discussion, or what makes for a good discussion. So if you're viewing and you'd like to contribute regarding the statistical 1000%, now is your opportunity to be able to contribute responsibly to this current conversation. So as we do that, I'm going to go ahead and mention also in that previous clip, we were able to see in a reference to the Charleston church massacre. That's what they're calling the Charleston church massacre. And that happened with Dylan Roof. I know the name Dylan Roof may be a buzzword, and you'll probably remember that more than anything else. But it's a very important massacre to discuss. But we won't be going into extreme details regarding that event tonight. There will be a time that we will actually break down that entire event with the details behind Dylan Roof's reasoning for conducting this massacre. But know that, you know, some of the reasoning is tied to this far-right extremism. And so you will see where that will circle back once we cover that in depth. But now let's move forward to look deeper into the terror-related violence that, you know, will be the focus of this next clip, okay?
Globally, the number of attacks dropped between 2014 to 2017, but recently the United States has seen a surge in what's been called terror-related violence by the Global Terrorism Database. And Virus says the far-right increase happening in the US right now is also occurring in some European nations because of a commonality all these countries share.
Where you're seeing far-right movements increase is where you have a white population that feels under threat by growing minority or immigrant populations. And so the problem with white supremacist terrorism isn't going to go away.
Most of the 65 ideologically extreme incidents that happened in 2017 were linked to anti-government, fascist, anti-Muslim, homophobic, anti-Semitic, or anti-immigrant motivations. Like the Unite the Right rally in Charlottesville, Virginia, where a driver rammed a car into a crowd of counter-protesters, killing anti-racist protester Heather Heyer. That rally included members of the alt-right, neo-Nazis, and white nationalists. And right now, we're about to meet the man who tried to warn the country about this far-right swell way before it even happened. Daryl Johnson is the man who told the U.S. government it should brace for a resurgence of right-wing violence all the way back in 2009.
You know, on the Republican side, there was absolutely no interest in listening to what we had to say, which I thought was sad. And what I find staggering is that, you know, I'm a conservative, I'm a Republican, and yet I could call out this threat for what it is.
So Johnson foresaw this, but what made him predict it?
I, Barack Hussein Obama, do solemnly swear
that I will execute the office of President to the United States faithfully.
But it wasn't until we had the 2008 election that we saw a resurgence in these groups. We had the first time African-American president, which really agitated a lot of the racist groups. This was kind of their worst nightmare come true. And then we also had the economic downturn in 2008, which provided fertile ground for a lot of people to join anti-government groups.
Johnson was so worried about a rise in right-wing extremism, he testified before Congress in 2012. His testimony came in a post-9/11 nation when the U.S. government focused heavily on Al-Qaeda. For Johnson, this wasn't some partisan issue. He was a third-generation Republican trying to highlight what he saw as a security threat.
In a second, I want to make sure the delay is not affected, but globally, terror-related violence dropped from 2014 to 2017, or dropped in 2014, between that time of 2014 and 2017. But eerily, that same terror-related violence increased in America during that time. And that, you know, is saying quite a bit, considering that there's a sentiment in America today that denies that America is a racist country. Now, I'm going to look and see if I have any audience reactions. because I know that's probably pretty controversial. I do believe I lost one viewer. Every show we stream, and then the words white supremacy comes up, and then someone leaves. So I know someone's pretty butthurt about that. But oh well, it is what it is. Okay, so all right, getting back now, Heidi Barrett says that that what we are seeing in this far right extremist movements, we see it increase. Where we see it increase is in the same places that we see a white population that is feeling that they are under threat from a growing minority and or immigrant population. And that is extremely complex, okay? Because of a simple fear of the growing minority, it should not be influencing social issues such as police brutality, housing discrimination, or the day-to-day operations like attempting to deliver your DoorDash order to a residential property without some sort of negative encounter by a Ken or a Karen. Now, the other part of this growing fear is to an immigrant population. Now, how that translates into fear must explore the perception of those who conserve colonialist traditions. Okay, now how they deny colonialism occurred in America alone, and how they intend on passing this kind of education down to their children, who will undoubtedly use their connections to family to benefit from the same positions of power. They'll undoubtedly use that and use those connections to usurp that power for their own personal benefit. And when when they take office, we don't see a change. We constantly see the same cycle, and like I said, that's due to their connections. Now you saw in the video a third generation Republican, Mr. Darrell Johnson, who simply saw what what was appearing to be a threat to national security. And that's extremely interesting how their perception of a growing immigrant population spells their demise. I mean, you really think about that. A growing immigrant population, how does that spell your demise? So if anyone is out there and you want to express your feelings, or you want to give me a reasoning right now, why you believe that a growing immigrant population spells the demise of the white population in America, especially at like what are they at, like 84% of the population, and they feel that a growing immigrant population spells their demise. I would like to know that. So I'm going to check the comments. I do know I have one additional comment. I can see that one already, but I'm just giving this one a second because I don't want to rush through this, because this is a chance for the Doug Reeses of the world out there that keep making assumptions and say, hey, here's your chance to get on the show. Here's your chance to put in the comment. Explain to me, how the rise of an immigrant population spells the doom for white Americans. Good evening. Yes, it is extremely complex. A lot of these conversations are, we were challenged with explaining systemic racism, and we've been taking it on every week. It is quite draining sometimes, but we push forward because we know that there is a positive feedback to conducting these discussions. Even if no one participates, we are still pushing the information out there so that someone, it is now changing their perspective or changing their behavior as far as how they respond from here on out. So there's nothing like education. So, like I said, I found it extremely interesting how the far right's perception of a growing immigrant population spells their demise. This simple concept of immigration or immigration naturalization causes them to band together with the commonality of bigotry. Now, banding together isn't a big issue, but to band together with this commonality of bigotry, now that's an issue. That's something that needs to be looked into. Now, it's extremely interesting also to see that this is the natural reaction, or what appears to be the natural reaction, if we believe according to what they're saying, okay? Yet they've never been treated that way themselves. That is what's interesting. So they hate immigrants, but when they were the so-called immigrants, they weren't treated this way. Now, and that statement I just made is 100% absolute. But like I said, we are developing the Irish American diaspora as we speak. So we will go into the exclusionary techniques that Europe practiced against Ireland when we talk about the religious divide and the added immigration of the Irish. And we'll look into that in other times in our history that could be, that could be the source of this fear that drives the far right extremist groups to form. So like I said, it is complex. The video also stated that most of the 65 ideological extreme incidents that happened in 2017 were linked to anti-government, fascist, anti-Muslim, homophobic, anti-Semitic, and anti-immigrant motivation. I want to put that statement in the comment section so that you can see it. It's important to actually see it written. I say it, I know sometimes I speak fast and I'm trying to actually, keep within the bounds of comprehension, but sometimes I move pretty quickly with it. So the right views immigration actually as a loss of jobs for low economic populations. Immigration is a good thing, but as a conservative, it simply comes, it must come in the right way. See, that's the thing. Who's to say it's the right way? Because I mean, when we look at them, they set the tone, they set the standard for, how they came over, and in a way, they killed a lot of Native Americans. So, I understand they came in with a might makes right, ideal, but now, because these are the people that keep saying they're constitutionalists, they're traditionalists, and they want to keep, they want to conserve things the way they were. But however, when anyone else takes that same mentality, they get this whole idea of, hey, we got to protect this, we got to stop, we can't let this happen, and it's they were never treated that way. So that is what appears to be hypocrisy, and what causes a lot of the arguments that I believe that happen currently when we have simple discussions on Facebook. Yeah, and I see your second comment through legal channels. I see it. So that's why I said earlier immigration naturalization, because I felt like the immigration naturalization, that process even frightens some people. And it's kind of like, well, they did it the right way. So why is there this issue? And so that's something that, like I said, why I express that, I try to say these things, but sometimes I roll through real quick, and I don't know if everybody hears it, but that was the reason why I did say that. They feel like immigration naturalization is also a threat sometimes. I've heard specifically from some conservatives that I've had discussions with about that. They've expressed that they just don't want immigrants here. Half of their argument was that they're illegal and they're taking all the jobs. And that's a very loaded conversation because some of the jobs they do take, I don't feel like that these conservatives would take that job. The other thing is the idea of what they provide. I think Geraldo Rivera got kicked off of Fox for saying something like this, but it was something that I thought about and talked about it in a college course. And then I got no response to it. And I just kind of thought, well, I guess no one saw that. But the idea that they are not legal. So if there are taxes that's taken out of their paychecks, doesn't that stay in the pot? Because they can't claim the income tax. So how does that work? So now we're talking about tax and evasion, and then discovered this lady said that, there's this big thing about, we don't have to pay taxes. There's no rule on the books. But that's a whole other conversation. But just something that, like I said, that I discussed with that individual. And we had a conversation, and then they kind of just quit on me on that one. You said it. I didn't say that. She said the IRS and the INS are antiquated government entities. And the reason why I'll read these sometimes, everybody, is because I've been told by 3 different people that they do listen to this as a podcast. I told them it's a blogcast because we play videos, which gives you that extra medium, because we know that there's many different ways. There's several different learning styles, and some people are auditory, some people are kinetic, and it just depends on how what your preference is in regarding to learning. So we do try to try to expand across the entire spectrum. It's kind of hard to do that on a weekly basis, but we attempt to definitely give you the visual. If anything, we will definitely give you visual. So and that's the reason why I will read those comments, everybody. So but getting back to this, the video stated that, like I said, that 65 ideological incidents that happened in 2017 were linked to anti-government, fascist, anti-Muslim, homophobic, anti-Semitic, anti-immigrant motivations, and that the potential reason for those 2017 incidents were the reaction of the 2008 election. And that resurgence of those groups was caused by the Obama election, agitating racist groups. But America isn't racist. Just putting that out there for a second. That's open. Like I said, the comment section is open. You can voice your opinion about that as much as you like. This also contributes and adds to the conversation. I'm not saying that that it is right now, and I'm not saying that it isn't. Okay, so I'm going to remain objective about that. All right, but every assessment, I feel, must be objectively explored so that our assessment remains more accurate than those conservatives who continue to pump out contradictions for ratings and conservative clout. And that's all I'm going to say about them. But getting back to the video, the terrorism analyst Daryl Johnson that you saw said he saw a rise as a security threat, the rise of right-wing extremists as a security threat. And also because of the economic downturn, he said that, we saw a cause for this. And I personally attest to that because that also being true, because something I personally experienced, as many, people have been communicating consistently. They blame Barack Obama for destroying our economy. And I remember these discussions very vividly when I was in the military. And it was quite interesting to see how everyone continued to state that it was Barack Obama who ruined the economy. And a lot of that political rhetoric, I didn't really buy into it because of the nature of the facts that kept surrounding all the accusations, such as the accusation that Barack Obama made the market crash in 2008, by raising his hand and swearing in. I mean, he raised his hand, swore into the Oval Office, or swore into the office of the American presidency, and all of a sudden the market just crashed. Like, that was his fault. And there are people who are still saying that to this day. But, I was looking at this very deeply at the time, and no decisions that, were made specifically by him. But yet, he was receiving all this blame for something that wasn't, there was not enough order to even see, nor, was it at any point articulated by our country's leaders. The first lie that I remember I came across, and it hit me because I was in Iraq at the time. I was in Iraq. We were given orders to go to Afghanistan, and I literally looked at my orders, and I kind of looked at it like this, and looked at my master sergeant, and I was like, "How do you know we're going to survive Iraq?" And they laughed. They laughed. Of course, I was a private at that time. They laughed, but I knew that we had orders to Afghanistan, and immediately upon winning the final debate between he and Hillary Clinton. I believe it was the final debate, and I remember Fox News coming on and saying that Afghanistan was Obama's war, and I was like, the man didn't even swear in to the presidency yet, and they said that this was Obama's war, and I kind of thought, now at that time, Bush was the president, and I was just was pretty amazed because I knew that we had orders, and those orders was under that presidency. And I just kind of thought this, like, how did this happen? How did Barack Obama start this Afghanistan war when everyone was sent over here in Afghanistan by President Bush? And I just kind of, so right then I just saw something that didn't jive, something that didn't go well together. And it led me to continue to question everything that I've been coming across. Obviously, security threat, i.e. the insurrection at the Capitol. Yeah, huge security threat. Everybody saw it coming. But a lot of decisions that were made by the U.S. president, getting back to what I was stating, a lot of decisions that were made by the U.S. president does not truly take effect for some time. Some of them even years before they will take effect on the country, and that's a fact. So you can fact check that and argue that all you want to. Bring the information, bring the receipts if you put it over there or on this side to the comment section or whatever. Yeah, bring the receipts. But that's a fact. Yet, somehow that fact somehow eludes objective thinking when it came to the mere mention of the name Obama. And the constant microaggressive hate behavior towards Barack Obama and over-aggressive behavior. I mean, they were hanging effigies in North Carolina. But that, and many of his supporters were, it was stunning to see it revealed a lot like things that I had learned about regarding race relations in America growing up in America. And what I mean by that is I'm going to mention the Black experience, okay? We mention this quite often. And it's important to understand, the perspective and the perception that a Black man holds and why he may hold it. Because you need to ask, why does he hold that perception, as opposed to just turning your head and saying he holds that perception. The racism that was on display during that presidency or during that time, it seemed opaque to many white Americans, but it was painfully obvious to Black African Americans. And it was seeing America divided up in more ways than the political admission of bipartisanship. So we were seeing all these divides. We saw this new racial divide, and we started coming out with these racist tropes and everything about Black people always vote Democrat, and then they used to vote Republican, and they're silly. The same stuff that Larry Elder and Candace Owens is spouting off today. Wow. It was seeing America divided up in more ways than that political admission of bipartisanship. Okay, and that was part of the Black experience in America that is constantly being acknowledged by one side of America, one subculture of America, while at the same time it's denied by another. And this is where the heart of these miscommunications continue to occur today during the conversations regarding race. And if we can get our hands on this, we'd be a little better off. So here we are at a place in America where terrorism analyst does his job. All right, Mr. Johnson does his job, and he predicts this rise in the far-right extremist groups and violence that would occur. Now let's take a look into what the government, has done or will do regarding this terrorism assessment.
8 members of the Hootery, an extremist militia in Michigan that were acquitted this year of plotting to kill police officers and planting bombs at their funerals, had an arsenal of weapons at their disposal that was larger than all 230-plus Muslim plotters and attackers charged in the U.S. since 9/11 combined.
The reward the government gave Johnson and his team was retracting the report and dismantling the team that created it. For decades, the U.S. government has poured money into programs to fight what it calls violent extremists and terrorism. But those are terms which it doesn't even apply consistently. Here's President Trump talking about a mass shooting a white man committed that killed 26 people in Sutherland Springs, Texas in November 2017.
I think that mental health is the problem here. This was a very, based on preliminary reports, very deranged individual. A lot of problems over a long period of time.
And here he is talking about allegedly religiously motivated violence.
We are also taking strong measures to protect our nation from radical Islamic terrorism.
Most governmental programs have focused almost entirely on Muslims, not only stigmatizing that group, but also paying very little attention to what statistics show is the actual threat. White far-right violence, which doesn't often earn the label of terrorism or extremism, hasn't been the government's priority. But you don't have to take my word for it. Take a look at how the nation spends its money. We don't really know how much the country has spent on its so-called global war on terror, because the U.S. doesn't have an accurate accounting of the funds. But one report estimates that from 2002 to 2017, the U.S. government spent $2.8 trillion on wars in Afghanistan, Iraq, and Syria. Even as funding declined in 2017 from previous levels, the government still spent $175 billion that year. While the nation was shelling out all that money on what it says was countering foreign threats to America, the rate of right-wing domestic attacks increased nearly sixfold from the 2000s to the 2010s. What did you recommend in your testimony that the government should do?
I recommended that they look at domestic terrorism definition that's codified in our laws, because right now it doesn't really fit the definition of what domestic terrorism is, so that leads to confusion. I also recommended that we need to have federal dollars devoted to training state and local law enforcement on these types of threats. But to this day, really nothing that I recommended has been implemented.
Now, that may have shocked you, and it may not even made you bat an eye. The fact that the government retracted that report and dismantled the team that put it together, it sounds like cancel culture to me. Nah, that was just another joke. I'm a little corny with the jokes, but that was a joke. Intelligent people probably found that funny because the hypocrisy. For one, that joke was distastefully made. I know, I get it, but it was only made so that you can actually pull back and actually start to see the danger that occurs when you ignore something that could derail a form of knowledge that's leading to true equitable wisdom. All right. The same kind of wisdom that would allow for the security of an entire nation. And, and don't take that, what I just said lightly. Those words that I just spoke, they should be taken very seriously, considering that the whole event called 9/11, it occurred because some people at high levels of our government decided that they would ignore warning signs. Now, hopefully you're starting to see exactly what I'm insinuating. But the way that this last video that we just viewed could have been perceived can be extremely confusing because the American prism of the perspective on patriotism. Now, many white patriots are probably seeing this as, just I explained it earlier, regarding not being able to see the severity of the threat assessed from ignoring intelligence. Now, however, many Black African Americans will look deep at this one and acknowledge the lack of objectivity when defining terrorism in America. And I'm directly insinuating that America will not define the Ku Klux Klan as terrorists, but they are readily available to slap a label on an element of Black people coming together and calling it a Black identity element. And for it is that kind of contradiction that is the thorn in the side of anyone who is rolling over on this American bed to find another American, attempting to convince them that America's not a racist country. Now, I hear this theme of by discussing racism, we're dividing America, but I don't see those same people being able to look back on something like this, what we just discussed, looking at this last video, and I don't see them, also seeing it as, ignoring this very major problem is dividing America. They don't say that. They don't say that about anything. Ignoring this is the only time they've said that we shouldn't ignore, I think it was the Muslim, right before the Muslim ban that Trump implemented. So I just want people to actually start thinking about some of these concepts that constantly roll around on these conservative platforms And I have a few people that always show me certain things, and it's fine. I like it because it actually keeps me more in the know. And that's also something that, like I said, it's very difficult to put these things together because you have to find the narratives that they're already in play and actually explain that. And I know everybody's probably itching to know what critical race theory is, and we're going to get into that. We did not want to go into that any deeper than we did previously because we actually Cage is actually reading it to understand exactly what it is before he will step out and make an assessment. And that's what I do love about my very intelligent co-host is that he does not speak on something without getting the facts, and that's very astute of him. Anyway, you witnessed in that video. You witnessed Donald Trump further move ahead in assessing the reasoning for the Sutherland Springs, Texas mass shooting as a mental health issue. Interesting. That's completely interesting. Notice, I'm going to put this up, but I want you guys to notice that that he doesn't define it as violent crime directly associated to race. Did you notice that? And yet many of the Trump supporters continue to define any violent crime that happens in the Black community as attributed to race specifically. And this is where we talk about the racialization of a violent crime being a huge problem in regard to the discussion on race relations in America. That's a very deep and very complex issue that we're going to explore in depth in the future, but I will show you this. I'm going to show you this just so we can see and we can identify exactly what I'm talking about. This definition for racism, okay? I know this often, we show it so many times, but it seems to escape. Everybody who is using these terms, it seems to escape. And so what we're looking here, and you're seeing it is further the use of that belief to institutionalize a white supremacist belief or an ideology into the web of interlocking institutions creating influence or power. Now we talk about the racialization. That's what we're discussing. They took the crime, and he didn't associate the one in Sutherland Springs, Texas, and Trump didn't associate that to race at all. But as soon as there's any violent crime in the Black community, it's associated to race. And that could be, like I said, because of the communities that are white versus the communities that are Black. And we did have that discussion and talked a little bit about why or how this urban planning has developed these communities, these white and Black communities. And we talked about that with the redlining, the gentrification. We just still didn't go into blockbustering, okay, or gerrymandering. We will cover that later. But we did talk about redlining and gentrification. It was a very long, almost 2 hours and 15-minute presentation. Go back and check that out on the Panther and Cage Facebook page, or go check it out on YouTube. You can look at my personal name if you know who I am. You just look that up on YouTube. You'll be able to find that. And go ahead and make your comments and everything then. Speaking of comments, I do believe I have a comment here. Yeah, it is laughable. It is extremely laughable. Let me go ahead and get this image off the screen for you. I just want to show you that because we talk about the racialization and sometimes people said it doesn't exist. I've been told by individuals that know, Black people make it racist. They always bring race into it, but as soon as it's quiet, and all of a sudden someone mentions crime in the Black community, and then there it is. And so I'd ask that you just use your mind and use it well. If you're really invested into progression, really invested into the progression of these conversations. Trying to get to the next part. We were talking about, that complex issue regarding the Black on Black crime or the Black on Black violence in the Black community is a very more complex issue, and we'll discuss that in the future. We're actually laying the groundwork for it all. Because when we talk about it, one of the first things I want to say is redlining. Because of the consistent redlining, these Black communities are created, and if crime is always or mostly done in proximity, then the Black on Black crime would be the responsibility of it would be the individuals who did the urban planning. And then you're going to blame it on the city, kind of, and then we're actually going to take a look at that, and I want to get the reaction. So I give you a heads up there, all right? So know that that's coming, and that's the kind of stuff that I'm talking about. So you make a comment, and I respond back, and you're going to have to come back with something or whatever. I want progression. I don't want the same old racist tropes. That stuff doesn't solve anything. We're going to actually discuss these things so that we're well aware before we have these discussions regarding race in America. All right, now America's intentional turning of its heads has created a very huge problem, and one of the problems was known as 9/11. They did that before now. Okay, now the video revealed that they were doing it again, and that they refused to label the far right violence as terrorism or even label it as extremism. Okay, now could this be how the conditions were primed for the January 6th insurrection? How it became inevitable? My co-host Cage even predicted that, as well as gave us some of the groups that would be a part of such an event. Yeah, and I don't think I know it's not obtuse. I know we can see this. All right. So this video did spin and touch on the military-industrial complex, but we will not be addressing that at all tonight, and sometime for the foreseeable future, because the topic is extremely complex itself, and it will circle us back around to the mental health issues that our veterans of the United States military are suffering. Now, we talked deeply about that in the earlier live streams that we conducted, and we highlighted that, you know, we tried to define what shell shock and PTSD was. And if you follow Panther and Cage, I know Amber, you're probably out there, you're probably gonna watch this later. But I know that we showed that, and we showed that video, and we broke down a scene from the theatrical reaction of John Rambo from the movie First Blood. And for some reason, I believe that video was deleted off, so we have to probably restream that. I don't have a copy of that video, but that video is no longer appearing on Facebook, and you know, I don't have the backup video, but that could be a good thing because it gives us an opportunity here at Panther and Cage to revisit and possibly restream that presentation. So, you know, the far right, you know, extremism video concluded that we just saw. It concluded with terrorism analyst Daryl Johnson acknowledging that there needs to be progression regarding the discussion on terrorism in America. I believe that also. It also, I mean, every Black person knows this. It also reveals that, you know, that he himself agrees that there should be training for our state and local law enforcement in identifying these types of threats. Something that we've been saying for quite a while, but according to Blue Lives Matter supporters, they don't agree with that. This is one of my direct responses that I said a while back when we had a live stream with Willie Taylor. It was a very early live stream, and you know, he and I engaged regarding about the processes that, you know, that go into fixing what's going on in terms of the violence in the Black community. And I specifically mentioned the infiltration of white supremacy being an impediment to just signing up, you know, Black police officers as a form of resolution. You know, I said that local law enforcement was not able to detect white supremacists within its ranks. And this is based after the information that we had researched here, and tried to share this with the rest of the Brevard County community. But that is a very huge concept that needs to be discussed thoroughly. It needs to be discussed at the local and state levels. And the only reason why I'm saying that is because I'm not going to say federal, because, you know, that way of having that or undertaking that conversation, whenever you mention the federal government stepping in to tell the state how to conduct its operations, many conservatives who would reject that idea wholly, and it would lead us back to right where we are right now. And that's something that, you know, I'm not only seeing, but this has been brought up before, but conveniently and intentionally ignored. So if the local and state law enforcement agencies are unable to detect these types of threats, how can they effectively protect those Black officers or those officers of color that goes to sign up? And that was the question that I had to Willie Taylor at the time. Probably won't get an answer from Willie Taylor about that, but like I said, that question is on the table. So I really want to know the answer to that. I really want to discuss that, and that probably will wait because I'll probably discuss that in a very public group, and because that should be think tank, and I would like to actually hear what an actual law enforcement officer's opinion about that, and not necessarily just one that you just pulled out of the air or whatever. I really want to know what they do or what they've done to avoid that from happening, because it is occurring. Um, we talked in depth about the blue wall of silence before, right before we did the police. I think it's the first police brutality in the police brutality series. We talked about the blue wall of silence and its impact upon law enforcement today. And I can say that there are people I know that are paying attention to these, and that there are ears listening. And I can say that these issues are going to be discussed very soon in regard to policing in America. And we will definitely circle back around and discuss this even more when we talk about those police officers like Carriel Horn, who was fired for stopping an incident of police brutality. Say what again? I was talking about the question. One of the things that I talked about with Willie Taylor was I said that there's this threat of white supremacy involved with law enforcement today. It is an issue because it has been an issue since 2006. Jamie Raskin did a whole House subcommittee meeting where they looked at some of the statistics that the FBI collected and stated that the white supremacy infiltrating law, that was what they wanted to do. And this was something they wanted to do since the slave patrols. The KKK wanted to get in with law enforcement. They had successfully done that and said they want to continue to do that in the 60s. So when we're seeing that over and over and over again, like this cycle happening, we know that there was that threat. I know that there was an article talked about that this symbol was supposed to mean white power and that a lot of police officers were doing that and that meant white power. But I'm going to tell you that's a lot of misinformation out there. That does not mean white power. That is the actual sign for 3 circles. The KKK used that. So Ku Klux means circle. And so there was 3 circles for the KKK. That's what that means. So when you see that, it doesn't mean WP. Everybody says that, but I'm telling you here, it means 3 circles. You have to look at the Circle of Adelphi and you have to look into the KKK. Just do your research. Okay, I don't want to get in here and get into this whole lecture. We're already an hour and 18 minutes in. I don't want to do this huge lecture or whatever, but we've been discussing this stuff on Panther and Cage. And if you watch the episodes, you'll get this information. We give it to you at the most pertinent, the most relevant time. How you use it is up to you. Yes, I do know that. I do remember that each culture, each police department has its own culture. I get that. That is one of those things where you have to trust each department or each, police department. But like I said, I'm still asking the question, how or what process are they using to avert to catch white supremacists? Because one of the things that, that happens with this white supremacy is they don't identify it. It starts out like it doesn't start out, but it's at one point we're talking about far right extremism. So we're looking at this far right or this alternate right, correct? And so when you look at that, that's the way like Dylan Ruth was off to the alt right. And then all of a sudden, somewhere along the line, and no one knows when, he just turned white supremacist and decided to go into a church and blast nine black people, or who knows how many black people actually understands, but he killed 9 people, right? So at what point was there a change? They said the internet, radicalized him. And the thing is not just the internet, because there are people in the military who look at the internet, and I'm pretty sure that's not what's radicalizing them. What is that? What's a part of that process? That's what I want to discuss. So I just don't want just that surface answer or whatever. I just want to get into the discussion of how this occurs. And there are deeper discussions, even off to the left. There are discussions that we can have, but we're not going to talk about anything in the Pan-Africanist movement or whatnot until we establish systemic racism. And we could have been there, but everybody was so hard up to say that systemic racism doesn't exist, and that racism didn't exist, and that black people that are just making this stuff up. And then as we see that, we see these Ken and Carols, or not Carols, but you see these Ken and Karens that are stopping people from swimming, stopping them from barbecuing. we're starting to see, you know, Amy Cooper stand over there, and then turn around. Amy Cooper's now trying to sue. So, you know, you can't even, like, you know, give them, you know, mercy, you know, after they, you know, try to use the police like a, how you say, profile or proxy, and try to make something happen, because they know that something bad is going to happen by creating that interaction between law enforcement and this black man. And so when you know, when you have that interaction or whatever, what they're doing when they're calling the police is, I'm going to call the police. She's selling water without a permit. You know, it's like, what is her true goal? And I think we've been seeing that quite often. And so this is something that needs to be addressed. However, it gets skipped down the road. The Asians have now have their anti-Asian hate bill, and still you have individuals like this week and last week and the week before that, they're calling you, you know, monkey N-words, and still no hate crime bill, right? So they didn't even pass the George Floyd Policing Act. So, like, it's very complex. It's, you know, we can talk about this all day. But I personally found it extremely interesting how the conversation always gets kicked down the road. And it gets kicked down the road so much and for so far until money is actually brought into the picture. And what I mean by that is, I mean the words defund the police. Okay, so here's the thing. I'll put this up. I know this is a catchword. It's always, this ticks them off. I know they're listening now, you know? So these words, defund the police, it caught the attention of local law enforcement, even here in Brevard County. And it seemed that nothing else could ever be discussed until the citizens of Brevard got into these tough conversations and the cry of defunding the police came up. Now, we're going to continue to look at this next video, and I want you to pay attention to the man named Jason Downer. He is going to provide a very unique perspective on exactly why he believes the far-right extremist movement exists today. But before we go into that, I'm just going to say this, because the reason why I said that comment, I don't want to be irresponsible, but what I'm saying is the defund the police, once that statement was made, it refers to taxpayers taking back money or reallocating money. And when it came to abolishing the police or taking this money away, all of a sudden there was this huge attention that was turned, and now there were town hall conversations happening. As before, when something was said or we asked for this, or, you know, something was spoken or whatever to give some sort of equality and treatment, you know, just the interactions, the stop and frisk, I know was in this big issue. They said that hands up, don't shoot was a lie and everything else. Sheriff Earl Clark he was on it. And no one wanted to talk. No one wanted to say anything or whatever. And I think two things happened. Colin Kaepernick took a knee, which everyone misappropriated that and started saying he disrespected the military. And then the defund the police cry came out. And when that actually happened, finally, city officials started paying attention. And so I do believe, in my personal assessment, is that defund the police was just a catchphrase to catch their attention, to get them to finally start talking like they should be talking. And I know that here in Brevard County, that is a fact, because I can turn on, I haven't watched one in a while, but I can turn on the, you know, just tune into one of these city meetings, whether it be Coco or over at the one of year or whatnot. But you'll see it where they rush someone off the mic, you know, before actually, you know, actively engaging them. I will say that that one of the county commissioners, you know, will speak to you, and we'll have that, you know, discussion. I've met him personally, and I know that he will speak to you. But I can say that as far as others, they seem like they're not interested in actually having that conversation when people are on that mic talking. And that's your community. Those are the people who represent you. You know, those are the ones you're asking for their vote. And for you not to listen to them says a whole lot. And you're wondering why you're seeing these movements and the momentum that they're gaining. This is because you're not speaking to them. All right. So I just want to state that. That is just my personal opinion. And I'll address that other comment in a second, Quentin, in just a moment. Well, actually, let me go ahead, and since you're special. Cage says, when those Ken and Karens obtain positions in society like judges or get put in charge of hiring, their prejudices become systemic. Like I said, facts. Can't argue with that. That's an air to where, you know, we try to say that there is systemic racism. Oh no, I believe that there are people who are racist, but not the system or whatever. Well, that person holds a position of power. And if you think he or she is not going to use their bias, then you'd be sorely mistaken, right? So at this point, if you can admit that bias and that racism does exist, but you can't admit that this judge may be racist, and it's happened. I think I started to put on it tonight on the show. There's an individual, a city leader, who said the N-word. He said, "Are there any house Negroes here?" And he didn't say Negro, right? And the point is that you're white. You don't say that kind of stuff. And in that context of house Negro, like, that's very touchy because we don't even talk about that. One of the things we haven't done here on Panther Day is talk about plantation life. When we do, I need all ears and all eyes paying attention, because there are a lot of things that you just don't understand yet. So that kind of language, yeah, that's the same as saying the monkey N word. That's that's white supremacist stuff right there. Okay, so let me go ahead and get to this video. Yeah, completely. I'll probably put it on the show next week or something if we don't give the finish up the Irish American diaspora. But yeah, it's currently happening, and that's the reason why we show those kind of things, just to show you, like, hey, this isn't something that's of the past. Someone made the comment to me that this racism happened hundreds and hundreds of years ago. It's not around today, and I'm just like, I think it was a mayor. I don't know if he was a mayor or whatnot, but he said N-word. So just like, like, come on, really? Are we? Yeah. Anyway, let's get to this far right extremism, so we can get this over with, push through this. I do believe we are at the 4th segment.
And there's something else that's happened since Johnson has given his congressional testimony that's fueled the rise of far-right hate.
If I was still in the movement, I would be doing what everybody else is doing too. I'd be voting for Trump because he's saying all the right stuff.
Jason Downard is a former neo-Nazi who became involved with the group when he was convicted for his role in a 2009 drive-by shooting.
Now that you have somebody like Donald Trump, it's about what he's saying, and he's the president of the United States of America. So you get these neo-Nazis like, hey, we got this president, he's pretty much giving us okay to do whatever the hell we want.
He's not the only one who thinks President Trump bears some responsibility for the current wave of far-right fanaticism.
He sort of activated them in a way that they hadn't been before. And this is sort of the tragedy of the Trump era.
Critics have skewered Trump for failing to respond clearly and firmly to far-right violence. Here's what he said after that deadly attack in Charlottesville.
I think there's blame on both sides. You look at both sides. I think there's blame on both sides, and I have no doubt about it, and you don't have any doubt about it either.
He's also identified as a nationalist, which some see as a wink and a nod to those who call themselves white nationalists. So anti-racist critics find it difficult to believe Trump's being sincere when he says,
"We will reject bigotry and hatred and oppression."
Instead of putting the government's focus on the right's growing extremism, Trump's then Attorney General Jeff Sessions made it a mission to crack down on so-called black identity extremists.
Thank you all.
This business with black identity extremists is a classic example of where the federal government under Trump is focusing on something that doesn't exist. And the report that was leaked that talked about this issue and talked about how there's a rising threat from black identity extremists basically has no factual backing.
The FBI even did a 12-page report on so-called black identity extremist groups. It says we're targeting law enforcement. Here's what they didn't do a report on.
Has the FBI done a report on white identity extremists that are likely motivated to target law enforcement officers?
I'm not aware of that.
Meanwhile, far-right groups like the Sovereign Citizens actually have targeted law enforcement.
They have a significant threat to law enforcement, especially during traffic stops and other unplanned encounters, because a lot of these groups look at law enforcement as kind of being the foot soldiers of a tyrannical government. They view law enforcement as kind of like the government intrusion on their lives.
This administration's pursuit of so-called black identity extremism has drawn comparisons to J. Edgar Hoover's infamous COINTELPRO. It was a covert action program that relied on infiltration, dirty tricks, and even violence to neutralize dissidents like Martin Luther King Jr. and the Black Panthers.
Right. Good old Jeff Sessions. I'm not aware of that. This is what we were talking about at that time. So you can tell it's an old video, but this is what we were talking about at that time. How like they were ignoring it. They were just completely ignoring it. They didn't even look and say, okay, we have black identity extremists. There's no such thing as a white identity extremist, right? So like, where did this terminology come from? Anyway, the kind of rhetoric, the rhetoric of leaders holds a responsibility to the state of homegrown terrorism or white nationalism today. That brand of rhetoric, it is ignored, just like the kind of rhetoric that is spewed by Charlie Kirk earlier, or Candace Owens, or Joel Patrick, of all people, and many other conservative contradictory specialists with a mic. And did you see Heidi Byrick there? You see what she said in that video? She went in depth on the business of black identity extremism. She said now she said, that it didn't exist. And that here's the thing, for something that didn't exist, she said a 12-page report that assessed that this existence was not factually based. So you wasted time throwing nothing but opinions, no fact-based information, 12 pages, right? A 12-page report that stated that the black identity extremists were going to target law enforcement spurred more fear among the ranks of law enforcement. It's no wonder that there was an immediate reaction to Black Lives Matter with Blue Lives Matter, okay? I'm quite interested in what gave them the whole idea that black identity extremism did exist. So, there was no effort to assess white identity extremism. And even though it shouldn't have been a monumental task to even do that, as again, you heard it in the video, the subject of COINTELPRO came back into this Panther and Cage conversation. We've spoken about this thing like 4 or 5 times already. And I hope that our viewers understand just how important that is. And I hope that they can see why we even brought that up in the first place. So, but here on this live stream, we're going to bring you receipts every time. We're going to try to talk about why these conversations are relevant. And we don't just leave you hanging like, some other people do, dedicated their podcast to this rhetoric, and what they have is really just miseducational at best. So let's go ahead and get this over with. I want to go ahead and get right into the next.
And even violence to neutralize dissidents like Martin Luther King Jr. and the Black Panthers.
Newton's last trial and manslaughter conviction were over.
Trump's response to far-right extremism is set against this historically blemished backdrop.
What is the FBI pursuing in terms of domestic terrorism? Nobody knows. Like, we don't know, are there 1,000 open cases on this topic? We have no information. So it's really hard to say the government should be doing X if we don't even know what the government's been doing.
And then there's the fact that the Trump administration nixed a grant to fund a group fighting far-right violence. In the waning days of his presidency, Barack Obama awarded $10 million to 31 groups countering violent extremism. Only one of those organizations was focused on fighting far-right extremism, Life After Hate. Then Donald Trump took office. His administration reevaluated all the grants. He ended up giving out only 12 and didn't dole out the $400,000 grant previously earmarked for Life After Hate. The distorted narrative of far-right extremism has deep roots within the birth of this nation.
Well, the country was founded on the idea of racial supremacy. One thing that's interesting is a lot of the white supremacists who are active in the United States today, really what they ask for when they want a white homeland, they're harkening back to a period that was real, right, where white men made all the decisions and, pretty much made life horrible for the rest of the populations in the United States.
Now, let me say this about the FBI before I move forward. They said they didn't have any information for what the FBI was doing or what they were targeting or what. I can tell you some of that stuff is very, very, very touching. And that's the reason for that. That reason is so that they can keep the sanctity of what you call the sanctity of national security. So they don't want to. They're going to classify that information. A lot of information, when it gets classified, it is deemed, on levels of secrecy based on the potential danger that it could cause if the wrong people got a hold of this information. So that's why you're not going to know what the FBI is doing. And that doesn't mean they're not doing a job. That just means that we don't know. Okay? So now as you look into the January 6th insurrection and what caused it, I wonder if they're going to look back on the facts like what was just expressed through how the Trump administration reevaluated funding that was dedicated to the groups that were going to combat far-right extremism and see it as contributing to the failure to protect the Capitol building. That's a very important question. All right. You know that the conservative right has been expressing that the government should look into why there weren't enough Capitol Police officers staffed that day. And that may be a very legitimate reason as to why there weren't enough Capitol Police to deal with the January 6th insurrection. Because you had Jeff Sessions pull these reports back. You had this stuff, you know, you overlooked it or whatever. So you very well could be responsible for this January 6th insurrection. And that's not being political because I hate politics. I'm just saying, just based on the information that was just reviewed, okay? And there's other variables to it. But I also wonder, are you starting to see, as the Panther and Cage audience, is my Panther and Cage audience starting to see how all of these contributing factors are relevant to today's conversation? How Heidi Beirich has acknowledged that America was founded on the idea of racial supremacy, yet there's this concerted effort to counter-strike anything with the word race involved. And this current onslaught of doing everything in their power to stop critical race theory from being taught, even though critical race theory is not even being taught below college level. Legislative power has been pushed to ensure that it never ends up in grade schools. Now that's another example of the white fear that we're talking about, you know, that creates this white rage, right? Let's see, reaction. That's good. So let me go ahead and do this final video on the far-right extremism, and then we'll finish this out. Well, I have more, but.
And even violence to neutralize dissidents like Martin Luther King Jr. and the Black Panthers.
Newton's last trial and manslaughter conviction were over.
Trump's response to far-right extremism is set against this historically blemished backdrop.
What is the FBI pursuing in terms of domestic terrorism? Nobody knows. Like, we don't know, are there 1,000 open cases on this topic? We have no information.
But if we're really looking to understand the growth and effect of far-right extremism in our society today, we've got to take a look at our past. And we don't even have to travel too far back. Going back to the decade of Doc Martens and dial-up is far enough.
4 elements that I have to receive information regarding.
Holy cow. About a third of the building has been blown away.
Everything went totally dark and I was knocked out of my chair. That seemed to all happen at once.
Right-wing hatred is the cause of the deadliest act of domestic political violence in U.S. history. And the face of that attack wasn't the one Americans initially searched for.
Well, am I pure evil? Am I the face of terror sitting here in front of you?
So what happens when far-right violence meets an unprepared government?
The federal government of the United States must take full responsibility for Oklahoma City.
Hey fam, thanks so much for watching. Don't forget to like, share, and follow this page. Be sure to stay tuned next week so you can see part 2 so that me being out here freezing isn't a total waste of time. We worked really hard. We're headed to Oklahoma City. I hope to see you then. Thanks for watching. Bye. See you next time.
Interesting about that, I think that video was actually done just before the Terrence Crutcher, Oklahoma City, and I know you're probably not familiar with that. The last live stream, we will talk about him in the future too. But there's just so many names; it's too many to actually cover in time. But you know, it's a shame that we, you know, you basically for every week you gotta stream 3 or 4 times to actually catch all this information. And that was one of the reasons why I did have the shooter report, every Wednesday. But I stopped doing those only because I had some copyright issues going on there. Not real issues, but I have, a brand and everything, and I'm trying to protect that. And between that brand, this brand, I'm working with a lot of things, a lot of issues or whatever. So I will bring that back in time. That will just be a very informative show where I'll just talk about the facts, and then we can get on this show and actually do more conversating as opposed to actually him and Ha and talking about this stuff in the format that we are talking about. These live streams can get kind of long, as you can see. The Capitol insurrection showed other countries a thing or two also. Yep. Yeah. They're always learning, and that's the reason why, like, the FBI keeps some of their stuff classified, because they don't want those individuals to, that information to fall into the wrong hands, the individuals' wrong hands. So now that video directly asked, the one that we just saw, it just directly asked the question that we've been dancing around for the last hour and a half, and that is the question: what happens when far-right violence meets an unprepared federal government of the United States? Okay, saw the attack there. You saw the January 6th insurrection. We lived through 9/11. They always say never forget, but it seems like they want to forget. So I believe we saw the answer to the January 6th, when the Capitol insurrection occurred. The Capitol Hill insurrection occurred. And speaking to the Capitol Hill insurrection, we traveled back to when we opened our conversation tonight with the Department of Defense budget hearing, where Florida Representative Matt Gaetz attempted to sideswipe the Secretary of Defense, Lloyd Austin, with a question: how should the Department of Defense think about critical race theory? Now, it caused General Mark A. Milley to request a moment from from Secretary of Defense Lloyd Austin to interject a comment, which went viral.
He's not just a pig, he's stupid.
Excuse me, hold on. I think that was a wrong video. Let me see. I think I didn't upload this one. Give me 1 second. Sorry for the technical difficulty.
He's not just a pig, he's stupid. So what is wrong with understanding, having some situational understanding about the country for which we are here to defend?
Hard to believe that man wears a uniform. He's that unimpressive. The race hate, and that's what it is, has oozed from the universities, and it has infected the entire country, including at the very highest levels. Mark Milley is the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff. He didn't get that job because he's brilliant, or because he's brave, or because the people who know him respect him. He is not, and they definitely don't.
First of all, on the issue of critical race theory, etc., I'll obviously have to get much smarter on whatever the theory is. But I do think it's important, actually, for those of us in uniform to be open-minded and be widely read. And the United States Military Academy is a university, and it is important that we train and we understand. And I want to understand white rage, and I'm white, and I want to understand it. So What is it that caused thousands of people to assault this building and try to overturn the Constitution of the United States of America? What caused that? I want to find that out. I want to maintain an open mind here, and I do want to analyze it. It's important that we understand that, because our soldiers, sailors, airmen, Marines, and Guardians, they come from the American people. So it is important that the leaders, now and in the future, do understand it. I've read Mao Zedong. I've read Karl Marx. I've read Lenin. That doesn't make me a communist. So what is wrong with understanding, having some situational understanding about the country for which we are here to defend? And I personally find it offensive that we are accusing the United States military, our general officers, our commissioned, non-commissioned officers, of being, quote, woke or something else because we're studying some theories that are out there. That was started at Harvard Law School years ago, and it proposed that there were laws in the United States, antebellum laws prior to the Civil War, that led to a power differential with African Americans that were 3/4 of a human being when this country was formed. And then we had a Civil War and Emancipation Proclamation to change it. And we brought it up to the Civil Rights Act in 1964. It took another 100 years to change that. So look, I do want to know. And I respect your service, and you and I are both Green Berets. But I want to know. And it matters to our military and the discipline and cohesion of this military.
What's happening in our schools and our military and our government is both simpler and easier to recognize than that. It's not critical race theory, it's racism.
How should the Department of Defense think about critical race theory?
Could I make a comment, Secretary? I'm sorry.
Well, I'm very limited on my time, General Milley.
Well, I just want to make a comment that the feedback
I know, but
I've gotten...
I've asked the question to Secretary Austin.
I don't know what the issue of critical race theory is and what the relevance here with the department. We do not teach critical race theory. We don't embrace critical race theory, and I think that's a spurious conversation.
Thanks, Mark Milley. We appreciate your contribution to our generation's scientific racism. By the way, have you read anything recently about winning wars? Apparently not.
Apologize, that was the right video. That video was in there because of that last comment also. He mentioned something about winning the wars, and that's going to talk about a press conference that I'll show. Just 2 questions from that press conference where they were talking about the drawdown from Afghanistan, how it's relevant today. You saw that the video went viral. Tucker Carlson decided, it was so viral that Tucker Carlson decided to weigh in on it. You saw the garbage that he spoke. But I also want to review the commentary, and I want to add to what we're going to also see in the comments from the secretary. See the comments from Secretary Austin and the Florida Representative Michael Waltz, because there's more to this. They keep splitting it up, but the most important parts, I'm trying to show this to you. But in the second portion of the DoD budget hearing, you're going to see it. So I want y'all to pay close attention to these exchanges. They're kind of same things, but going to look. And what you're going to notice from Secretary Austin is that he's going to say, I'm going to give you a quick one. He said that the Department of Defense is focused on extremist behaviors, okay? He attempted to refine his statement by saying not ideology, but people's thoughts, not people's thoughts, not people's political orientation. So earlier, it appeared that the federal government wasn't looking to implement on any of the suggestions that Daryl Johnson stated, the terrorism analyst Daryl Johnson from earlier. But but currently, or as of late June, the DoD is focused on extremist behaviors. So that's the DoD versus the FBI. They're different, and how they work and whatnot. You can actually Google that and look and see how that actually works. But know that if the FBI isn't looking, the DoD is looking. So now here we go to this thing of where this organization or this institution may know something, but this one doesn't, and they don't share. This is the reason why Bush created Homeland Security, or at least the byline, the reason why, the excuse that he said he created Homeland Security so they could communicate and talk. But say all that to say this, go ahead and check out this portion of the DoD budget hearing. It's the first portion of the DoD budget hearing, and it's going to be quick. They're all like 3-minute videos, so I just want to get this out so you guys can see this.
First of all, on the issue of critical race theory, etc., I'll obviously have to get much smarter on whatever the theory is. But I do think it's important, actually, for those of us in uniform to be open-minded and be widely read. And the United States Military Academy is a university. And it is important that we train and we understand. And I want to understand white rage, and I'm white, and I want to understand it. So what is it that caused thousands of people to assault this building and try to overturn the Constitution of the United States of America? What caused that? I want to find that out. I want to maintain an open mind here, and I do want to analyze it. It's important that we understand that because our soldiers, sailors, airmen, Marines, and Guardians, they come from the American people. So it is important that the leaders, now and in the future, do understand it. I've read Mao Zedong. I've read Karl Marx. I've read Lenin. That doesn't make me a communist. So what is wrong with understanding, having some situational understanding about the country for which we are here to defend? And I personally find it offensive that we are accusing the United States military, our general officers, our commissioned, non-commissioned officers, of being, quote, woke or something else because we're studying some theories that are out there. That was started at Harvard Law School years ago, and it proposed that there were laws in the United States, antebellum laws prior to the Civil War, that led to a power differential with African Americans that were 3/4 of a human being when this country was formed. And then we had a Civil War and Emancipation Proclamation to change it. And we brought it up to the Civil Rights Act in 1964. It took another 100 years to change that. So look it, I do want to know. And I respect your service, and you and I are both Green Berets, but I want to know. And it matters to our military and the discipline and cohesion of this military.
In my previous discussions with service members and particularly officers, I would hear about complaints over parts not arriving on time, long deployments, and in my more recent discussions with those officers, the number one issue that they raised to me with concern, often unable to speak publicly for fear of the type of retribution that Lieutenant Colonel Lohmeyer faced, they say that your stand down regarding extremism did not help our military, it hurt the military. And I want to share with you that perspective, that it caused service members to otherize one another. It impaired group cohesion. How should the Department of Defense think about critical race theory?
Could I make a comment, Secretary? I'm sorry.
Well, I'm very limited on my time, General Milley.
Well, I just want to make a comment that the feedback
I know, but
I've
asked the question to Secretary Austin.
I don't know what the issue of critical race theory is and what the relevance here with the department. We do not teach critical race theory. We don't embrace critical race theory, and I think that's a spurious conversation. And so we are focused on extremist behaviors, and not ideology, not people's thoughts, not people's political orientation. Behaviors is what we're focused on. But one final point, and thanks for your anecdotal input, but I would say that I have gotten 10 times that amount of input, 50 times that amount of input on the other side that have said, hey, we're glad to have had the ability to have a conversation with ourselves and with our leadership. And that's what we need to make sure.
And again, reclaiming my time, Mr. Secretary, it may be that you're receiving that input in the ratios you describe because it was your directive.
And you saw that slight Matt Gaetz when he insinuated there that the Secretary Austin received many experiences of feedback that was positive because it was Secretary Austin's directive. Now that was like saying that he was only getting that response or that positive response or people providing that feedback, that they were just sucking up to him. So Gaetz has always been very snotty with whomever he speaks with that happens to be a person of color. Just something that I'm just acknowledging, and I can prove it. Just last year, he took a shot at Representative Cedric Richmond in a congressional hearing on racism and police reform. And let's observe that 3-minute speech about the policing in America from Mr. Richmond before he descends into a big top circus outburst by Matt Gaetz.
Mr. Chairman, Let me just start by saying I am absolutely sitting here offended and angry as hell. And I want to explain to what we always say is how we refer to each other, my good friends on the other side. By the time I'm finished, you will be clear that we are not good friends. As a black male who went to the 5th best public high school in the country, who was a victim of excessive force, who has a black son, who has worries that you all don't. And to my colleagues, especially the ones that keep introducing amendments that are a tangent and a distraction from what we're talking about, you all are white males, you never lived in my shoes, and you do not know what it's like to be an African-American male. And all I'm saying is, if you are opposed to this legislation, let's just have the vote. But please do not come in this committee room and make a mockery of the pain that exists in my community. And it reminds me of the argument about the 1964 Civil Rights Act, or the 65 Voting Rights Act, where 126 people voted against a Civil Rights Act, 85 people against a Voting Rights Act, because they had all these side issues. Either man up and say you don't believe in it, or let's talk about the real issue. And yes, we're not interested in watered down version of this bill. I'm not interested in equality with all deliberate speed. This is a crisis. People are losing their lives. So if we have other things that we want to fix, then fix them in another bill, fix them at another time. But people are dying as we talk. So I am not interested in moving at a snail's pace. I am not interested in a watered-down bill that mandates nothing. I'm not interested in studying Antifa. I'm not even interested in studying the Klan or sovereign citizens right now, because that is not the imminent threat that black men face on a daily basis. And right now, too often, it is law enforcement, those who were sworn to protect and to serve. And so all we're asking today is to deal with that. I don't mind dealing with other pieces of legislation. I don't mind dealing with other issues that you all may have. And what I don't want to leave this conversation with, and why I'm speaking now instead of later, is because I don't want you all to leave here saying, well, we didn't know. We didn't know that's how you felt, Cedric. I want it to be crystal clear, and I will give you the benefit of the doubt that it is an unconscious bias that I'm hearing, because at worst it's conscious bias, and that I would hate to assume from any of the people on the other side. Well, bias, and that I would hate to assume from any of the people on the other side.
Will the gentleman yield?
Sure.
I appreciate your passion. Are you suggesting that you're certain that none of us have non-white children? Because you reflected on your black son and you said none of us could understand.
Man, stop. I'm not about to get sidetracked about the color of our children. We're talking about black kids. I reclaimed my time.
You said that
I reclaimed my time. I know.
You want the discussion?
I know that
gentleman reclaimed his time.
I said I reclaimed my time. I already know that there are people on the other side that have black grandchildren. It is not about the color of your kids. It is about black males, black people in the streets that are getting killed. And if one of them happens to be your kid, I'm concerned about him too. And clearly I'm more concerned about him than you are. So let's be clear about that.
You're claiming you're more concerned for my family than I do? Who in the hell do you think you are?
Gentlemen,
if the shoe fits.
You don't know how much we care about our families.
Kick dog holler.
You should take those words down. I know
gentleman
you care
will
about your family and love your family.
The gentleman will suspend. The gentleman will suspend. The time belongs to the gentleman from Louisiana.
Cedric, would you yield?
Was that a nerve?
Yeah, you damn
I
right.
yield to the gentleman from Louisiana.
I say this honestly. I appreciate you yielding. You are my good friend, and we hail from the same state, and I respect you and I love you. And I say this honestly. If all that you said is true, and I believe it is,
then why didn't the Democrats allow us to assist with this? Why draft a bill in the dark of night in a back room somewhere and then present it to us whole cloth? If you really wanted us to work together, and we want to, why not give us that opportunity? Do you have an answer for that?
You know, I do have an answer for that. Because you all were in charge for a while. We've been in charge for a while. I have been singing this same song since 1991. People on the streets right now are demanding action right now. We saw what was just presented in the Senate. It was a watered down bill, and right now this is a national crisis. And we don't want to move with all deliberate speed. So those ideas that are good, we are willing to meet and to talk about. And the author of the bill, Ms. Bass, Congresswoman Bass, has indicated willingness to continue to work as we go forward. But as of right now, this is a critical emergency for people in this country. And I just think that we should not debate everything from Flynn to all this other stuff. We know what we're talking about.
The time of the
Let's vote it up or down.
Time of the gentleman has expired. For what purpose does Ms. Lesko seek?
That was Louisiana Representative Cedric Richmond expressing his desire to draft a bill for the policing in America that would be effective as well as expedient. He tried to pull all the cards, put all the cards on the table by saying that either you man up and say you don't believe in this, or let's just talk about the real issue, which is the Black experience in America. And you don't believe that that kind of response Richmond received. I'm sure you guys didn't believe that. But if you took a look at it and you saw what was revealed was the snottiness of Matt Gaetz, and like I said, Matt, what he said after, I personally think that Matt Gaetz is extremely disrespectful and disingenuous. I think that his theoretical comments about how do you know none of us have Black sons was just truly insulting as a Black man listening to that response. You can clearly see that Mr. Richmond chose to reclaim his time, and it appeared that it was extremely obvious that Mr. Gaetz intended on wasting Mr. Richmond's time with a theoretical insult. Anyways, getting back to that final DOD hearing, this is all important. I just, you're seeing it all play out.
I want to be very clear. The military needs to be open to all Americans. Absolutely. That is the strength of the United States military. But once we're in, we bleed green and our skin color is camouflage. We're worried about that American flag on our shoulder. That's the only thing our enemies are worried about. I think we can agree there. But the other thing that they raised to me was a seminar that over 100 cadets attended titled Understanding Whiteness and White Rage, taught by a woman who described the Republican Party platform as a platform of white supremacy. This is going on at West Point as we speak to our future military leaders. And sir, I would encourage you, I would demand that you get to the bottom of what is going on in the force, and further for what it means for civilian oversight of the military when our future military leaders are being taught that the Constitution and the fundamental civilian institutions of this country are endemically racist, misogynist, and colonialist, and therefore it is their duty to resist them. What does that mean for a future cadet who one day will be sitting where you are?
This is not something that the United States military is embracing and pushing and causing people to subscribe to. Now, whether or not this was some sort of critical examination of different theories, I don't know. But
we need to understand our past. I want to be very clear. But can you agree at least that understanding whiteness and white rage presented in ICAL over 100 cadets probably is something that we shouldn't be teaching our future leaders of the United States Army?
As you have described it, it certainly sounds like that's something that should not occur. Again, I would like to know the specifics of the.
Thank you, Mr. Secretary.
Representative Walz proceeded to diminish the idea of racism in the military with the reappropriated "we don't see skin color," saying that we bleed green and our color is camouflage. And then he ignorantly says that we're not worried about, we're worried about the American flag on our shoulders. That's the only thing our enemies are worried about. And I'm thinking that's a very presumptuous statement. And it's a good example of why it's so hard to win the hearts and minds of a third world country at war. And it's insulting to the enemy and the references that he made as they were one-dimensional, uneducated combatants who can never understand the nuances of racism in America. In fact, I have two personal experiences that I encountered in Afghanistan, and I don't want to go into in depth and detail because we're already past the 2-hour mark. But I can tell you there was something that that I had a bias, not necessarily a bias, but a perception of basically, yeah, like, you know, that they weren't as educated as Americans. And I came across this first sergeant, this Afghan first sergeant, and this guy was extremely intelligent. We sat down and we had a conversation and we had lunch together, and that really opened my eyes. And so at that point, I kind of just, you know, it did change me. Some people did notice that change, but it's just like, you know, I'm not going to sit here and look at this computer or and talk to this person, whatever, and they tell me that they're all towel heads or they're idiots and blah 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 blah. I'm not going to just buy that. You see what I'm saying? I'm not going to do that. You know, there's a point that happens when you interact with people, and there's some learning that actually tends to happen. So that another incident, something else happened that actually opened my eyes too. But I'm not going to get into that. That's in detail. We will talk about all my old, in Iraq and Afghanistan war stories, whatever, at some other time. But I just want to state now that Mr. Waltz brought up that information about a seminar that was being held in Ike Hall, where 100 West Point cadets attended an Understanding Whiteness and White Rage seminar, right? And he said that it was taught by a woman who described the Republican platform as a platform of white supremacy. Now, that he implored that Secretary Austin investigate that with what of what the cadets were being taught, and that the Constitution and the fundamental civilian institutions of the country are endemically racist, misogynist, and colonialist. Therefore, it is their duty to resist them. This is what he said they were being taught. But of course, you heard Secretary Austin's response that they don't embrace it. Basically saying that they need to have the knowledge of what it is. You have to know what it is you don't like anyway, right? So Mr. Waltz said, and I quote, "We need to understand the past. I want to be very clear, but can you agree that at least understanding whiteness and white rage probably is something that we should not be teaching future leaders of the United States Army?" Which in my opinion is very stupid, because now I know that, as we always say, there's no such thing as a dumb question on this broadcast. But we're talking about military leaders being aware of ideologies that may influence violence. And you're talking about something that has consistently happened throughout time now. And I find this concept laced with extreme hypocrisy, as the future armed leaders were being taught that understanding of something like jihad was influencing violence. So basically, Mr. Waltz was attempting to reveal that, what many don't understand about the military, that many of the leaders within the institution don't want to think. They want you to just follow orders. And that is a fact. And no one here can argue with me and keep their integrity. I was in the military. I know what I'm talking about here. There are some leaders out there who don't want you to think, okay? They want you to do what they tell you to do, just to follow orders. The advice that I was given was, "Shut up, boy, and get in the foxhole" will be something that you would hear. I didn't really hear that, other than basic. I didn't really hear that a lot. But I got the message that individual who had served about 8 years in the military told me before I went in and served my 8. Okay. Now I want to be clear about the military, because the military isn't for everybody, and that there are things that only a few of us can actually endure when living that kind of lifestyle, and that's not across the board. That kind of attitude was not felt completely across the board. I had some very good leaders, I had some very human leaders and respectable people who I worked with. So they may not recall some of these things, but I did. I know where to stay and where to hang and who to talk to. I learned very quickly, and I had advice from an individual, 2 or 3 individuals. Cody, if you're still out there, man, I love you, man. Thank you for all the advice you gave me before I went into the military. It was wonderful. How can you understand the past without truly exploring the reasonings about why certain institutions were created? Institutions like slavery, slave catchers forming into slave patrols, and from there evolving into police. All these things have to be explored in order to accurately understand the problems that we're dealing with in regard to race. Okay. Now, if you cannot explore that with any form of integrity, you will not be able to find any effective resolutions that produce equality or equity in America. Now, you can ask, what is the goal? And it can be a viable question, for Mr. Waltz. But Do not put it, past the politician to be dishonest and extremely biased. And I'm going to show you a quick example of exactly what I'm talking about.
I can tell you, the House floor was never breached, and it was not an insurrection. This is the truth. There was an undisciplined mob. There were some rioters and some who committed acts of vandalism. But let me be clear, there was no insurrection, and to call it an insurrection, in my opinion, is a bold-faced lie. Watching the TV footage of those who entered the Capitol and walked through Statuary Hall showed people in an orderly fashion staying between the stanchions and ropes taking videos and pictures. If you didn't know the TV footage was a video from January the 6th, you would actually think it was a normal tourist visit.
Bold-faced liar. Straight up bold-faced liar. So you can't trust these guys just because they're on TV or whatever, or just because they're elected these positions. And that was Georgia Representative Andrew Clyde, who you just heard lying through his teeth. And it was another glaring example of next to Charlie Clerk's rendition of the Tulsa Race Massacre, of why critical thinking must be applied to the history of this country, because historically there have been they've been the most privileged liars in position of leadership. That's fact. Historically, there have been the most privileged liars in positions of leadership. Okay, that's caused a lot of harm, and the most recent has been the voter suppression. Okay, but that's a whole nother episode that we're gonna, eventually we're gonna get onto, but we're not gonna get into that right now. We're furiously working to bring together a series addressing the Irish American diaspora in order to effectively or accurately explore the Black on Black violence in the Black community. But coming back to the heat that was pushed upon Secretary of Defense Lloyd Austin and General Mark Milley, both were available for the July 21st live press briefing in regard to the issues like the drawdown of Afghanistan, the Taliban gaining ground, and the military strategy regarding any threats that are currently facing our nation.
But I want you to know, and I want everyone to know, I want America to know, that the United States military is an apolitical institution. We were then, we are now. And our oath is to the Constitution, not to any individual at all. And the military did not and will not and should not ever get involved in domestic politics. We don't arbitrate elections. That's the job of the judiciary and the legislature and the American people. It is not the job of the U.S. military. We stayed out of politics. We're an apolitical institution.
Are you concerned that some of these comments that are attributed to you are pulling you more into politics than necessarily your office should be?
Let me just make a comment here. It's really important to me that this department remain apolitical, and so we're going to do everything within our power to make sure that our troops, our leadership, both civilian and military, remain focused on the task at hand and understand that they are not a part of the political apparatus there. So we will remain apolitical.
Now, the Secretary of Defense and the Chairman both laid out a very solid stance. That is the ideal or the standard of them to be more politically correct. But the stance that the military shall make no stance is the way that it's supposed to operate. And to hear them both agree that the military will remain apolitical is something that promotes the potential for diversity and inclusion, which is the route that must be adhered to because the military already has issues that they're still dealing with that's influential to the media, like Private First Class Lavina Johnson, who we did a long breakdown of that situation. We covered that in a very detailed live stream last year. And then we have Specialist Vanessa Guillen. The details are still being uncovered with her case. But of course, despite those comments, despite those comments of how the military will remain apolitical, when given the opportunity, the press still asked about critical race theory again.
I wanted to ask both of you a question, somewhat for both of you following up on your recent House testimony. Mr. Secretary, for you first, could you explain in more detail your views on when you think and under what circumstances critical race theory should be an appropriate part of military education? I know you were asked about it in that hearing and you addressed it briefly, but I'd like to better understand your views on that. And for you, General Milley, in that hearing, you said to Congress that you wanted, in your words, to understand white rage and what it is that caused thousands of people to assault the Capitol and try to overturn the Constitution of the U.S. What caused that? I want to find that out. Can you offer a more detailed explanation? What led you to the conclusion of white rage? And since you've talked about it publicly before Congress, in your view, what is white rage and why and when should the U.S. military be concerned about that? Thank you.
Barb, you've heard me say that the critical race theory is not something that this department teaches, professes, embraces. You've also heard a couple of people at academic institutions say that, you know, they have required this to be reading for their students in specific courses. But because that's the case, does not mean that this department embraces this theory. And I stand by what I said earlier. And Barb, I don't want us to get distracted with the critical race conversation. This department will be diverse. It will be inclusive. And we're going to look like the country that we support and defend. And you know, our leadership will look like what's in the ranks of our military. And so I'm committed to that. This department's committed to that. The chairman's committed to that. And that's what we're going to stay focused on. And so, you know, we're not going to spend too much time debating the merits of this theory or any other theory. We're going to stay focused on making sure that we create the right force to defend this country and promote our values. And I know that's important to you and all of you in this room as well, Barb. But I thank you for that question.
So, Barb, in the minute or two left, first of all, I'm not going to address specifically white rage or black rage or Asian rage or Irish rage or English rage or German rage or any other rage, right? The events of the 6th of January happened. Those are all going to get sorted out. Historians will sort it out. Commissions will sort it out, and so on. But I do think it's important that we as a professional military not only understand foreign countries and foreign cultures and foreign societies. That's important that we do that. But we also need to understand our own society and understand the soldiers, sailors, airmen, Marines, and the society they're coming from. And I think that's important for leadership to study. Thank you.
You said the words white rage.
Yeah, I said I'm not going to discuss it right now. I think it's a very complicated topic, and we don't have the time to go into the nuance of it right this minute. I can do that later. I'll be happy to do that later. But right now is not a good time to do that. It's too complicated.
Now, I thought that was the clearest indicator of how the military plans to deal with this social political distraction and what it actually is of focusing on CRT being taught to the military universities. It's a distraction, okay? And there's this whole complex decision-making process that the military undertakes, or at least the U.S. Army conducts, that you all in the Panther and Cage audience, you're not ready for. Trust me, you're not ready for this. Not an insult. I'm just telling you this is very in-depth. I've explained it to two people. Explained it to Cage, and I also explained it to Danielle, I believe. Yeah. And this is a very complex military decision-making process. We don't have time for that today. I probably won't ever even go into that for at least for the next year. But y'all not ready for that until after we discuss the military-industrial complex, and that has to be thoroughly discussed. And that'll be a series. But I do look forward to that conversation. Believe me, everybody, I do look forward to the day I can have that conversation, because I will place a link for the entire press briefing also in the comment. I already did that. And that way you guys can keep up with the entire press briefing, what Secretary of Defense Lloyd Austin and General Mark Milley stated about the drawdown in Afghanistan and in regards to the Taliban winning, etc. But in regards to the white rage that we associated with the far-right extremism, we must keep our mind, these are my words now, we must keep our mind on the recent progress or the lack thereof, okay? So last year, we watched the Trump administration initially downplay the threat of white supremacist infiltration in the key places of the government. And this happened despite the House Committee on the Oversight of Reforms, Civil Rights, and Civil Liberties Subcommittee meeting with Chair Jamie Raskin and Carolyn Maloney, and they reviewed that FBI report where I got those statistics from earlier. The FBI report that showed that the far-right extremism gave indications that there was a considerable threat to white supremacist infiltration. Now, despite hearing revealing that the federal government must take action to rid the law enforcement communities of officers with white supremacist affiliations, the political vulnerabilities that must be explored in order to consider the potential existence of a threat, and the statistics that reveal that approximately 75% of all the extremist-related murders that were committed by right-wing extremists after 2009 and between 2017. That terrorism analyst earlier, Daryl Johnson, suggested that there be training employed in order to identify racist behavior that endangers the security and the intelligence of law enforcement operations. And what we see the results of the January 6th insurrection. We see that it indicates credibility to far-right extremism having a propensity to side with white supremacy. Okay, that is the fact. All right. We have evidence like a paramilitary group that is gathering intelligence on political opponents. We have the evidence of a paramilitary group named the First Amendment Praetorians. They're gathering intelligence on political enemies, and that gives us more indicators of a potential future threat. Potential, okay? Not saying they're a threat, I'm saying they're potential. The threat capability of the group like the First Amendment Praetorians, whose group consists entirely of military veterans, law enforcement, and the intelligence community members, possibly has the eye of the DOD. Remember, Austin said that they were concerned about the behavior, right? We don't know what the FBI is doing. However, it is becoming so unlikely that we would ever contain the political influence or the ideology of an organization like this that could threaten, that could easily slip through the cracks, okay? In any case, to be vigilant, we must consider that an individual with a strong mind and an ability to accurately, appropriately interpret irrelevant information is often misunderstood by the lesser-minded individuals. I want you to hear me out now. I'm going to say this again. To be vigilant, we must consider that the individual with a strong mind and an ability to accurately and appropriately interpret irrelevant information is often misunderstood by the lesser-minded individuals. And that is the cause for these sort of misunderstandings. Now, this is not to say that lesser-minded individuals in an insulting way, but it is acknowledging that there are individuals out there, even people who are in positions of political leadership, who intentionally choose to look the other way from critical information that may not fit their prevailing mindset, that their minds are by choice not oriented to the relevant information. And those individuals who intentionally choose to look away, they secretly envy the unique individuals who by nature are strong-minded or strong, high-minded people. And so you will undoubtedly come into contention when you're having these discussions on the bipartisan political battlefield, especially here on social media. Now, this is one of the primary reasons why I do not allow people to put these perspectives or put, my perspectives into a box that's labeled liberal or conservative. And it's because I look at everything individually and I think for myself, as well as objectively exploring the potential possibilities. Now, when it comes to this threat of far-right extremism, that methodology is absolutely critical thinking. The methodology of critical thinking is absolutely critically necessary, okay? I mean, it's imperative. Now, this has been Panther and Cage 13.5, far-right extremism. This conversation is far from over, okay? It is one that will pick up again in time, and especially as the nation socially progresses, and as they progress to understand that this is a potential threat. Groups like this is a potential threat. But you are encouraged to continue to comment on this live stream. Even after I leave, I'll look at the comments, I'll come back, and we'll possibly be able to develop another conversation regarding this particular incident or this particular information. If any question I ask and you want to put the information in the comment section, I would greatly appreciate that. I will read it, and we will try to see if we can come back and have a discussion. You can responsibly offer your opinion. You can ask a question. You can even conduct a reflection. If you choose to do that, if you choose to accept this, this live stream and the information that I've been putting out there. But it's time to conclude tonight's episode. And I'm sorry that we went over about 2.5 hours. I was trying to get it under 2 hours and 15 minutes. But I apologize, but it's actually good because we got some interaction tonight, and it's good because now we can see that looking back. But it's time to conclude tonight's episode. So, we hope here at Panther Cage, we hope to see you back, and we hope to see you contributing to the progressive and relevant discussions that we attempt to put out for the Brevard County community and any other community that feels that they're morally responsible for social equity and equality. But I'm your host, Panther, and I wish you love, peace, and I pray that the Most High guides your path.